$20 million company turned into a
Yep.
$200 million company. That's not a small
Yeah.
chunk of change.
And so one of the first things we did to grow the business was to bring in an outbound sales motion to complement the inbound only.
If message number one is you're always trying to take from people. I'm not saying you can't be successful despite it, but you're going to meet massive amounts of resistance, massive amount of fighting.
The gift selection was really important. All the touch points with as relates to it was really important because everything speaks.
Sometimes you guys were sending 6, 10 gifts in a row
Yeah.
to really get over the hump and win those law firms over.
You identify the 20% and then you only focus or primarily focus your outbound efforts on the 20%.
All right, you beautiful, sexy, attractive motherfuckers. I brought on probably, I guess I should say three of the coolest people. I got Quinn with me today, and also Corey's autopilot and my autopilot. So, it's a big party. We're bringing the AI bots to take notes. Um, Corey's been at this agency game for 17 years, which is exactly how long I've been at this. You learn, I wouldn't say we got it all figured out, but in almost 2 decades, you pick up a thing or two. And he's best known as the guy who helped Scorpion, which in my space and legal, like it's pretty much impossible to make websites and do SEO and not hear of Scorpion. When Corey took over, I want to say in like, I don't know, 2016, 2017, somewhere in there, he told me the exact date. They were a $20 million company. They're now a $200 million company today. And he was largely the guy responsible for marketing that machine. And what I brought him on today is he's got a new book that I think you guys are going to want to buy called Anyone, Not Everyone. And it's really about, stuff we've been talking about here. And I think it's just a cool read. So, my man, firstly, thank you for coming on here and doing this.
Frankie, it's a pleasure and an honor. I think it's long overdue. So I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah. We're just talking off air that like we're two people that we just know a lot of the same crowd. So it's always cool when you find that out.
Yeah.
Let's talk the juicy bit. You said this would be a good place
Yeah.
to start. $20 million company turned into a
Yep.
$200 million company. That's not a small
Yeah.
chunk of change.
No.
You can actually afford
Sure.
expertise on your Whopper now if you do that. Let's talk how that happened, first of all.
Sure. So a little bit of background on Scorpion. I joined in 2015. The company started in 2001 by a couple of best friends from high school who wanted to start building websites for local companies. They grabbed the yellow book or the yellow pages, which for the young folks was, the directory. It was the
That
Google
was
of the early.
Google before Google, just so you guys know. It was pen and paper, printed out.
Yeah. Yeah, yellow paper. And it listed all the local businesses. And what they did is they opened up the yellow pages and they went through the A's and started calling these businesses and saying, "Hi, would you like a website?" Well, they landed quickly on attorneys. And as a result of that, because A is obviously towards the top of the book, they ended up building a big agency business around attorneys, personal injury attorneys, criminal defense attorneys. And by the time I had arrived, they were doing websites and SEO and a couple other aspects of digital marketing. And I was kind of an outsider because the founder had hired all of his best friends from the local high school. And so it was sort of a great crew, but they were eager to grow it beyond what they were able to do with sort of the capabilities they had. And so I came in as their first marketing hire, specifically focused on growing the agency from a marketing perspective. And what I found was there was a 6-person sales team, all subsisting on inbounds, and it was a great sort of culture. And the sales team was, like they were very well compensated. They didn't work that hard. They drove nice cars. It was a kind of easy street. The challenge, of course, was that the founder was eager to grow the business much more rapidly, much bigger. I think genuinely, as a side note, because he wanted to help more people. And so one of the first things we did to grow the business was to bring in an outbound sales motion to complement the inbound only, which of course, when you bring the idea of cold calling to a bunch of sales guys who are making a lot of money on easy street from closing, taking orders on inbounds, it was definitely a big challenge that we faced. We did a number of things, which I'm happy to share. But I think the biggest thing that helped us to transform the sales motion from inbound only to inbound and outbound was to bring in this idea that I now call gift-based outbound. And if you've ever spent time cold calling into law firms, Frankie, you're probably familiar with this. You
In
have,
past lives, yeah.
yeah, so you have this gatekeeper, the office manager or whatnot, and their primary job is to prevent people from Scorpion contacting, actually getting in touch with the attorney, right there. So that gatekeeper person. And so the early days we would do cold calling obviously was not very fruitful. So we decided to, instead of just continuing that madness, we would send the attorney gourmet cookies. And the way it worked was we would put a tin of gourmet, amazing, like mouth-watering, earth-shattering cookies. Like you have to like hold the wall just not to fall down as you're eating these things. Anyways, we put these in a FedEx box that would go to the law firm. It would go by, it would bypass the mail room, go right to the attorney's desk. He'd open them up, see this beautiful tin of cookies, try one. It ended up in the break room. And everyone in the law firm was eating these amazing cookies, and everyone's saying, well, who brought the cookies? These are amazing. And of course, the word Scorpion was bouncing off all the walls. And by the time the salesperson called, it would be a known quantity. It went from, the typical resistance to, oh, you're the ones from Scorpion. Okay, let me put you through. And so that was an insight for us. And I see you're grabbing something.
I am. That's Go Giver
Okay.
101 right there to me,
Yeah.
right? That's if you want to get, give right there.
That's it. It's it. And another good book on the subject is written by John Ruhlin, a book called Giftology.
Mythology.
Really,
That's a
really
great one. Yeah.
powerful. I've become a friend of John's, and so the that worked so well that we ended up sort of institutionalizing this idea of giving gifts, such that every quarter all of our sales teams leads would get a new gift from us, and we would typically gift people 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 times, until which they would they would reciprocate. They say, okay, you want to meet with me, I'll meet with you. And by the end of the day, I had a $6 million marketing budget that 50% of it went to gifts. $3 million a year went to sending our sales prospects gifts. That's how important it was for our growth.
Yeah. And that's huge, because I see this all the time where people don't realize that, like, if message number one is you're always trying to take from people. I'm not saying you can't be successful despite it, but you're going to meet massive amounts of resistance, massive amount of fighting. You're not the first person in my world that's used the power of gifts to kind of open doors, but there is something really magical to, like, all right, that's the guy who sent the cookies. Okay, he gets a special pass through that. So I love how you guys were able to circumvent. I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit about just the nature of which those conversations changed when you open the door with a gift versus, hey, you're just, for lack of a better term, some asshole cold calling me trying to
Yeah.
sell some shit versus, hey, you actually like
Right.
sent me a kind of like personalized gift. It's delicious. And
Yeah.
and now I'm at least the courtship process. And, like, it's no different. I compare it to dating. When I first met my wife, I saw something. I creeped her Facebook profile and I found out what her favorite chocolate was. And she had written a poem. And I wrote a line by line response to the poem and showed up with her favorite chocolate. You better believe that was a better interaction than if I just had shown up and said,
Right. What do you
I'm
got
here
for
to get
me?
laid or whatever, like kind of like that equivalent.
I got a quota to hit here.
Yeah.
So 1,000%. So a couple of the nuances that are important, and you get it, Frankie, because you've been in the game. But certainly, if you send a gift of a cheap pen and you call in asking for, with a strong, like a hard pitch, you're not going to get the ultimate result that you want. What you're trying to communicate with the gift is that, hey, I'm sending this to you, Frankie. Not that I'm sending it to everyone. I'm sending it to you because I've researched you. I know about you. You are a successful business owner in the legal space. I'm familiar with you, your competition. I too am a specialist in this space. I've been working in personal injury attorneys, and we work with all these great attorneys. And I want to get to know you as a person, right? And so the gift selection was really important. All the touch points as relates to it was really important because everything speaks. Additionally, we sent it from a person, not from Scorpion. We sent it from Corey or from Frankie.
Yeah.
And Frankie has a story. There's a positioning around that, such that the successful law firm owner, who, by the way, because they're successful, they're getting pitched left and right. Like they're sick of
Yeah,
the
can I
normal
actually tell you,
garbage.
it's just a little story on that
Yeah.
because obviously I
Yeah.
know the industry a lot, and this is not unique to law firms, just so you guys know. but I think
Yeah.
people underestimate how challenging it is to stand out. Because I've had attorneys tell me they get pitched 100 times a day, every day, and some of them have told me they have a dedicated line. Like they're not against pitches, they just don't have time to manage them all. And some of them have a dedicated line. If you want to pitch them, you have 30 seconds to like leave your pitch on an answering machine, and then at the end of the day, somebody will go through, and the ones they're not
Yeah.
interested, next. Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
interesting. Maybe we'll talk to that guy. But like
Yeah.
I think and you know, because you mentioned this because you've been at the game a long time, this started like largely, at least in my world, in like 2008. So like people don't realize if they've been in business 20 years, like they didn't just start getting pitched once or twice yesterday. They've been pitched 100 times a day now, going on almost 20 years straight, right? So it's like I think most people, oh, I sent a message, a copy and paste script. Why didn't they
Right.
immediately just, you know, throw their money at me? I think they
Right.
underestimate the hurdle that's required to even get their attention in the first place.
Yeah, and so the impact you want to create, we used a standard at Scorpion for everything we did, but it included gifts, which was it had to be a USI, which stood for it has to be unique, has to be striking, and it has to leave an impression.
Yeah.
Okay. And we wouldn't send anything out that didn't match that criteria. At the end of the day, the fact that everyone in the law firm was talking about us proved the fact that we understood marketing at a deep level. And
Yeah.
so that's what got the law firm's curiosity going. It's like, well, you guys know something that other people don't know about marketing because you got us, right? So I'm interested now. I want to hear
Yeah.
what you got, type of thing.
Yeah.
That's sort of one aspect of it. The other one is we took on very much of a trusted advisor type of approach to our sales methodology. And what I mean by that is we had salespeople who only focused on personal injury attorneys on the West Coast. So as a result of that focus, they understood all the major players on the West Coast. Well, guess who also knew all the major players? The law firms we were prospecting.
Yeah.
We understood the business of being a personal injury attorney. We understood how to grow a personal injury attorney law firm, usually better than the way that than the attorneys. They don't learn business growth in law school. And so the way we would approach the sales calls when we got them on the call was very much, again, in the go-giver aspect of our methodology or approach of let's just give a tremendous amount of value. Let's teach them on the call. Let's ask them questions that no one else is asking them that's going to help them to get to insights that they didn't realize that they didn't have about their own business. And so that whole approach of what I now call deep specialization, which is a deep focus and a commitment to not only serving this audience, but having empathy for them, really helps to disarm the sales conversation. It turns it more into, as I said, a trusted advisor type of relationship,
Yeah.
which is, again, a differentiator in the marketplace. So the combination of the two really helped us.
Yeah. I want to ask you just a little bit deeper because it's one thing to do that onesie twosie. Like, hey, I'm really interested in working with this attorney. Let's send him a box of cookies and follow up with them. But you mentioned like at your peak, you were doing that 6 million a year. I would love to talk to you about the systems and the organization and how you managed to do that with consistency and to keep a team of people all kind of focused and doing it on, because Dan Kennedy has a thing that he calls random acts of marketing. And he said, you know, like when back in the days when he used to like direct mail was much more prominent, whenever somebody would get an idea to message him, he would make a little pile on his table and he would say, at the end of the year, I'd have a big pile. And if you sent two, you got two in that pile. And he said, what blew me away is how many people just did it once and never again, and never did it in the form of a campaign and never were consistent over time and continuous. Like you had mentioned there that sometimes you guys were sending 6, 10 gifts in a row to really get over the hump and win those law firms over. You know, I don't think most people are that consistent. So I'd love to hear just like, firstly, the thought process, and then how you kind of like practically do that from implementation. Because I always say like great marketing is really great. To me, it's like it's great operations in many ways. Like you guys must have had some 100%. Great operations to be consistent with that over time.
What a great insight. And I don't get to talk about this a lot. So I love that. It's a great question. So the approach is, and this is how I teach it today, is that there is an inherent product life cycle for an agency for a personal injury attorney. That means that every couple of years they're going to go to market and they're going to shop for another agency. And there's an analogy of like in the United States. I know you're in Mexico, but in the United States, at least, Americans buy a new house every 9 years. on average.
Yeah.
Well, they also buy a new car every 5 years. Well, it turns out that attorneys, at least at Scorpion, they would hire a new agency every 2 to 3 years. And so that was really the time frame that we committed to sending gifts to an attorney every quarter until we got the meeting. Now, the purpose of the gift was nothing other than to just get a meeting, like a high quality meeting with a receptive prospect on this, what I call a 20% list. And so this persistence, this frequency, and the duration of it took it away from, as you said, like we've all received the random sort of physical gift, whether it be food or a framed poster or something like that from a company that wants your business, but it's usually like a one and done, and the follow-up's garbage anyways, and so it's easily forgettable. What we did is we actually systematize it. I'll talk about the system in a minute, but effectively they would get a gift every quarter. Maybe they ghost us for the first couple of gifts, but at a certain point they're gonna reciprocate. They're gonna get the
How
message
can
like,
you eat
okay,
cookies and get a framed picture of your family and
right,
whatever, like you get a trip to the spa or whatever. I don't know
right,
what you guys are doing. At some point,
yeah,
like you're like, all right, you got my
all
attention.
right, yeah, all right, exactly. And that goes into the importance of the list building. And so because I mentioned I started there with a 6-person sales team. We grew that to 100 people. So we had a massive sales force. And so I was on the corporate marketing team, and our job was to, and I was the architect of all this. So our job was to um, go and source the leads for each of the vertical markets, because we expanded from attorneys to home services and then medical, and we could talk about that. But effectively, we went out and we through various resources and ways, we would collect sort of the addressable market, and then we would qualify them to try and isolate only those businesses that were worth pursuing for 2 to 3 years. And then instead of just sending gifts on the sales behalf, we actually sent the list to the sales team. Each person in their territory, in their vertical market, would go through a list of pre-vetted businesses and choose the 250 that they wanted gifts sent to. The reason why we did that, we learned the hard way, is when we just sent the gifts without them choosing, they wouldn't follow up. They would just like, I didn't choose that gift. I didn't choose that prospect. Like, I'm not a part of this thing,
Yeah.
which is so ironic. But so we learned that we had to enroll them in the process. And so, yeah, so there would be a back and forth on that. And then once we got a thumbs up on the list, we would also include in any sales floor, there's going to be a couple alpha guys, or the couple of the sort of the cultural leaders who everyone else looks up to. We got them on board with regard to what the gift was and why it made sense, and what the card had to say. And like, you had to get them all fully on board, which is important. And then we would send them, and then we would have a CRM that would track their follow-up. Be surprised how many times the sales team wouldn't follow up on these things, right? So we had to track that. We had to police that. They wouldn't get the next gift sent out until they did the proper follow-up. And so, as you can imagine, one person salesperson, sales floor, one thing, 100-person sales team, much different. And so I had a 30-person team on my end. That doesn't include the team overseas to doing all the lead scrubbing and all that, just in order to keep this thing going.
Yeah. Something you said that was kind of just like a little bit slipped in there, but I think is a critical piece is a lot of times people look at that and go, hey, I don't have the budget to just start sending gifts to my people. I'm not Scorpion. I'm not a, $20 million company, whatever. But in reality, like the real magic to me is that you start with a known list. It's one of the things actually that you probably have in your book as well, but I really emphasize the importance of identifying who are the buyers in the industry that actually spend the money, and really kind of hyper focusing on that. And a lot of times people worry, if I do that, oh, I'm going to lose so many people. But what actually happens is you just trim the fat substantially. Like, I kind of compare it to like my last, there was a time when like vacuums were sold door to door. And my last girlfriend, she had asthma and we had carpets. And so she owned every like advanced model of vacuum that you could possibly own. And what ended up happening is, like, when people knock on the door and sell vacuums, they don't realize that it's not your persuasion skills, it's not how awesome you are, it's that she's a vacuum buyer. That's what actually makes it work. It's like she actually believes you have a top 10 kind of vacuum. She's going to try it just to try and deal with, kind of the asthma situation. And it sounds like you guys have a systematic way of really hyper focusing on, like, these are the
That's
people
right.
that have the most amount of history of buying these kind of things, and we want to focus on
Yeah,
those. And that's such
that's
a
right.
key step that I think a lot of people miss is just thinking any dentist, any lawyer, any
No, 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 no.
insurance.
You go broke doing that because
Exactly.
you're going to send a lot of gifts to people who you'll find out the hard way that they actually aren't qualified. So,
Yeah.
there's this thing called, I think Russell Brunson, other people call it the Dream 100. I call it
Yeah.
your 20% list.
Yeah.
So out of all the personal injury attorneys, let's say you're focused on the West Coast, out of the 100% of the personal injury attorneys, what's the 20% that are the most qualified, the best prospects?
Yeah.
There's another dimension of this, which is there are a few personal injury law firms or whatever vertical market you're targeting that have an overweight sort of um, uh, people look to them for decisions. Like they're the tastemakers or the mavens of the
Yeah.
industry, and so you actually want to put even more emphasis on bringing them over as clients and then servicing the heck out of them
Yeah.
because they're the ones that are going to promote you amongst the networks. They're the ones that everyone else looks to. So if Scorpion's good enough for this person, well, I'm going to
Morgan
hire
and
Scorpion.
Morgan's using them. I should be using
Yeah,
them too. There's a
ex- there you go. That's a classic example. And
yeah.
so part of this targeting, like people approach the outbound with like a spam your TAM approach, which I'll buy a list of a couple million emails. We'll just hit the list. We'll see what comes back in, and then of course the salesperson is the one that's left kind of sorting to see whether or not they're
And
qualified.
not only that, if you're spending
Yeah.
that kind of volume, like your follow-up game is going to be non-existent because you're not really
Right.
strategic in that approach.
Exactly. How can you be hyper personalized and intentional at that level? And so what I teach is you do the list building at the front end of the campaign. You identify the 20%, and then you only focus or primarily focus your outbound efforts on the 20%,
Yeah.
because the 20% is also going to be the ones that are going to be going to the conferences. They're going to be the ones that you want to invite onto your podcast as a guest. And so they're really going to be getting hit up from a 360-degree perspective, as long as you know who they are and you're concentrated your focus on them.
Yeah. 100%. And for those of you guys, I mentioned that like if you haven't heard this analogy from me before, I kind of compare it to like if you sell shoes, your first instinct will be to sell to somebody who's barefoot because like there's a logical need for it. And actually what you really want to do is sell to someone who's got 200 pairs of shoes in the closet. And that's kind of what you're doing is you're identifying who has, who already owns 200 marketing services, is a mover and shaker in this industry. And often those are the people who are most willing to try something new, most willing to invest in something, most willing to do something different. They're not bound by like, yeah, get back to me after 200 other lawyers have done it. They're the people who are mostly like, the
Yeah,
movers and shakers. And so there's a trickle down effect too, is like you said, like when you get those kind of like influencers within the industry.
that's right.
So one last piece I wanted to talk to you before we share with folks about just getting the book. Surely in there, you got 100 salespeople. You figured out some magic for bringing in some top tier talent, people that
Mm.
not only can sell, but I always say it's just as important to sell ethically, where they're not making promises that you guys can't possibly fulfill on. There's an art to
Yeah.
being both able to close and close in such a way where, they're not saying things that can't be met after the fact. Because I've had salespeople, I'm sure you've had the same, where they'll promise pie in the sky things, but then
Oh yeah.
your fulfillment is non-existent because, hey, they promised we were going to make you 10 million by sundown. Like it doesn't usually work.
Right.
Um, but I'd love to hear your thoughts just on how you approach bringing in,
Yeah.
like kind of top talented people, what you guys look for, like kind of what that process looks a little bit like.
Yeah, so we grew a lot of the sales team, meaning we would hire junior folks to come in and then we would bring them up versus poaching from other agencies. Typically, we like to shape them in the form that we wanted to, and the way that we would do that. Of course, we had some big rainmakers on the team, but they were kind of the OG guys, and they weren't really about bringing other people up. They were focused on making their own money. And so, a couple of things that really helped us with that. Number one is we did have a lot of sales management infrastructure, which was really important. And what that means is that a sales manager would be able to be split between, let's say, 3 to 5 sellers, and that sales manager would be coaching them, mentoring them, bringing them up, which was really important, I think, for salespeople, especially as they're getting going. We also had our own software. You don't need it today, but back then, where we would have a predefined pitch deck. We had a predefined proposal system, and everything was basically prescribed for the salesperson. So all they were doing was just running the script and pushing the buttons. They didn't have a lot of discretion as it related to the scope or the pricing. And that was largely in part because we had a very vertically focused business. And so we could be much more prescriptive about how to price things because we had a lot of data about, what it takes for a personal injury attorney in Houston to be successful. And so as a result of that, there was not that the variability was kind of taken out of the equation. And that and I think, think of it like, when you go bowling, right? You have those the kids who go bowling, they have the bumpers in the gutters so that the ball actually goes down the middle.
Yeah.
That's basically what we did with our sales team.
I like that.
And I think the last thing is just had just a tremendous amount of training on the front end and ongoing training. So that was really important, especially as we scaled, because if we didn't do that, we would get a lot more of that random behavior that we wanted to avoid.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, just, somebody who's seen and done this with a lot of different salespeople of my own and kind of help people to build them. A lot of people are just winging it. And this is not just true of sales, but of hiring in general, is a lot of people think, I just want this person to come in and solve this problem magically. So they're looking for this, diamond in the rough unicorn salesperson who's going to come in and just magically know what to do, and they'll just take the ball and run. I'm not saying that never happens, but I love that you guys really deduced it down to, this is our process. These are the systems and the tools for doing the job, and then training to reinforce it and continue in the same direction. And like you said, like, the kind of the railings on the bumper bowling, which is my kind of bowling, by the way, because then I can actually get a strike every now and then. But doing it in such a way where they're set up to win, where they're walking into a winning process and building upon that, rather than I always said, like, I'm not against having great people. I think it's an important thing. But if you gave me a choice between great systems and great people, like, how much would McDonald's have scaled if they needed a great burger chef every time they open? Probably not very much. But they have, like, for lack of a better term, that systems any kind of pimply faced dummy 16-year-old can do. And if they happen to have great people on top of that, excellent, but it's not required because they have great systems. And it sounds like you guys really focused on building that infrastructure so that anybody could walk in and just, follow the process and be successful with it, which I really dig.
It was far from perfect, but that was the sort of the scaffolding for sure.
And that, that's the whole point of training, right? Is like, obviously you see deviations, you want to bring people back onto that. But, obviously it's better than just saying what a lot of people do is like, go sell it. Here's a call.
Right. Yeah. You're a sales guy. Okay. Yeah.
Go sell it.
Quote. Let me know when you hit it.
Yeah. And then even when they sell, like, a lot of times they'll say something that's not true, and then you, like, can't fulfill on it because they overpromise in order to make a sale.
And speaking of the book, which is The Proven System to Escape Founder-Led Sales, that's the subtitle. That is a big part of it. Why the founder is stuck right in the middle of it is because they haven't taken a process driven to sales, among other things.
Yeah. Love it. For those of you guys who are interested, I will make sure to put a link below to Corey's book, which you can find on Amazon. It's super cool. He's a cool dude, and we know a lot of the same cool people. So, like, just get the fucking book. It'll help you. Like,
honestly, stop fucking around. Let's go.
Yeah. It's like probably like $10-15. I don't know, looking at it right now, but
a little more expensive. It's a premium. It's a premium experience. It's a big promise. So, but it delivers. So yeah, I think it's like $22.
All right, he's a baller there. But you guys got $22. Go spend the $22. Anyways, I'll put some links for you guys. Much appreciated. Thank you for coming on here and doing this, Corey. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Frankie. It's been awesome.
Hey guys, if you like this video, you'll probably also like our free Facebook group, Beyond Agency Profits, Agency Lifestyle Design. You can get free copies of the book inside here. I look ridiculous. We're doing weekly Q&As, giving answers to all your questions. Some of the best, smartest, brightest people. We've got lots of industry leaders doing 7, 8 figures and beyond. It's a literal who's who of the brightest agency owners that I know, as well as lots of tips on scaling and stuff, books that work. So if you're not already part of it, you're going to want to be part of it. So make sure to click the link. I put it in the description of the video as well as in the pinned top comment below. So just scroll down and you can join, and it's totally free.